Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And today I wanted to do kind of a special video talking about the reasons why I love MMA so much and why every single year, on top of doing this YouTube channel, but I watched UFC and MMA. I started with WEC. I started watching that well before I started doing YouTube. And it does suck that I did it for so long without doing YouTube, because I feel like with all the changes with MMA throughout all of the years, it would have been so cool to be able to have that through all the years of doing YouTube. I think that would have been really, really cool to see all the changes of how I would have spoke, all the changes I would have done, videos, thumbnails. I'm still learning as it is, and I've been doing it for about 2 years now. But so 2006 grew up as a huge WWE fan, liking like Eddie Guerrero, another one that shouldn't be named because I don't know if YouTube will take it down, but Eddie, Ray, all these guys. I was huge into WWE. So I'm watching it about, like I said, about 2006 WWE, and then a little thing comes across my screen called WEC World Extreme Cage Fighting. For people that don't know, that was the company that was before, just another organization like Strikeforce, like Bellator, like now PFL, the merging. But, and again, back then, Scott Coker wasn't in charge of it. It was Boren, whatever his last name is, Repney, I think his name, I don't remember. Not a good guy, apparently. But again, I started with WEC, seen Benson Henderson there, Razor Rob McCullough, Cowboy, one of the reasons why he's my favorite fighter of all time. Jamie Varner was there. Damasio, the Angel of Death, Page, I believe his nickname was. Wild nickname. Seen him knock out Marcus Gaveo in 7 seconds. You haven't seen that? It's wild. Watched Mike Brown beat Leonard Garcia there. I seen Mike Brown finish Uriah Faber. Grew up hating Uriah Faber, and then I was very happy when Mike Brown actually finished him. Watched Jose Aldo from when he was 5-1 in the WEC. Watched that whole rise, beating Mike Brown, coming to the UFC, Mark Hominick, all of these things. Cowboy Cerrone making his UFC debut against Paul Kelly, and Paul Kelly sucker punching him as they touch gloves. And honestly, you go back and watch that fight, Cowboy didn't look great in that first round. He looked like he was trying to take his time, trying to figure it out. Started real slow, and he ended that fight with a rear naked choke. It was a nasty one. It was like this is typically how you do it. He did like a gable grip, rear naked choke. It was pretty nasty. But so many good fights. I seen Cowboy finish James Krause on the ground when James Krause was undefeated. Now James Krause is obviously barred from the MMA community, but back then he was 11-0, 10-0, something like that. It's just Brian Stann beat Doug Marshall for the title after the fact that he beat Steve Cantwell, and then Brian Stann went on to lose to Steve Cantwell by TKO. If you've not seen that fight, go watch it. It's all of these matches I'm talking about are on the UFC Fight Pass, so definitely go check those fights out. Some really good ones, like the Anthony Pettis Showtime kick happened in the WEC. Even though people put it on their knockout list, it was not a knockout. It was he dropped him. Very overrated moment. Cool moment. Very overrated moment. So many good moments in the WEC. Like Jens Pulver fighting Uriah Faber. A lot of hype about Jens Pulver coming over. Like I said, Leonard, and they fought twice. The first time went to a decision. Second time, Uriah Faber destroyed Jens Pulver. And like Cowboy fought Razor Rob, like I said, fought a bunch of people. Jamie Varner, Benson twice. I thought Cowboy beat Benson the first time 3-2. Second time he was submitted with the guillotine by Benson. So many good moments. Chidi Njokuani got knocked out in the WEC. Anthony Njokuani. Not Chidi is his younger brother, but Anthony Njokuani got knocked out when he was 8-0, I believe it was, by a Polish fighter. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, you go through the next couple years. watching, Stephan Bonner, Forrest Griffin, Chris Lieben was awesome back in the day against like Terry Martin. He was just getting wailed on against Terry Martin, and then Terry Martin gets caught. It was a crazy moment. Nick Diaz knocking out Robbie Lawler. So many good moments. And throughout all the years, even when me and my wife got together, still was watching fights, still was, keeping track of it. Not as much as I am now, of course, because this is what I want to do for a job at some point, hopefully. But the point is, the WEC actually had Frank Mir as commentator, and then he said he wanted to kill Brock Lesnar. They took him off the commentary booth for that comment. He was a great commentator, and then they brought Stephan Bonner to take his place, which honestly did pretty damn good for being not expecting him to be good. Did pretty damn good. Some weird mismatches, of course, on those fights, like Demetrius Johnson, but Demetrius Johnson fought Pickett. Brad Pickett lost to him by split, I believe. And then, of course, I go to Bellator. I see Brian Rogers knock out Vitor Viana. Remember, it was a Friday. I got home from school, turned on Bellator fights, and I seen Brian Rogers knock out Vitor Viana with a flying knee. One of the nastiest flying knees I've ever seen in my life. I don't care who you are. You go back and you watch that flying knee, it is disgusting. It's so cool. He rocks him and then hits him with this flying knee, and literally his body just shuts off. Very cool flying knee. Brian Rogers actually ended up not being too much in MMA. His knockouts were really fun, but towards the end of his career, he kind of lost that step, that chin, the explosiveness. He just started getting finished a little bit. But early on, he was really, really fun. I believe this was after his Shlemenko finish. He got finished by knees by Shlemenko, I believe it was. And then I watched Fedor Emelianenko defeat Brian Rogers when Brian Rogers was undefeated. I think 11 or 10-0. Right before he fought Alistair Overeem, which, boy, that fight was brutal. Actually, Brian Rogers trying to be a piece of shit, beat up on women, but whatever. But actually, Brian Rogers did pretty good in that Fedor fight. Had him on the ground, was beating him up pretty good. And then, Fedor, when he hit him with that right hand, he hit him so clean on the temple. Brian Rogers spun around. It was a crazy right hand. So throughout the years, I've seen some awesome moments. Some really cool finishes. Really, really fun. And then people don't know this, but Nick Diaz fought in the UFC before he went to Strikeforce. But in the UFC, he had minor success. He had success, of course. Like I said, knocking out, Robbie Lawler, but losing to Diego Sanchez. And but when he went over to Strikeforce, that's when Nick Diaz was Nick Diaz. Now, he didn't start off in Strikeforce very well. I believe he was finished by KJ Noons by cuts above the eye right here, I think it was. But he went on a run, beating, Cyborg, beating KJ Noons, beating Frank Shamrock, another Polish guy, I can't remember what his name was. Paul Daly he beat, some really, really good fighters. And the Paul Daly fight is one of the craziest first rounds still to this day that I've ever seen in my life. Such a good fight. Such a good war against two guys that just have wars. And Nick Diaz fought Paul Daly how Paul Daly wants people to fight him. And Nick still beat him. And then UFC, of course, buys WEC, like I was saying, brings over all these fighters. Mark Hominick, Jose, Cowboy, Benson, Pettis. Pettis actually debuted against Clay Guida, and Clay Guida beat him by decision, wrestled him. But yeah, and I seen John Jones lose his one fight with illegal elbows against Matt Hamill, and he was destroying Matt Hamill. Watched the Kimbo Slice, Alexander Houston fight on the Ultimate Fighter finale card, and so many good moments. And as I'm getting older, the moments that mean so much to me is watching that dog, watching that older guy who's been in the UFC for a while, maybe lost some, or lost some that he should have won some fights that he shouldn't have won. Seeing a guy get over that hump, get over that edge, is the moments that I love so much. So much. You know, and the legacy for me, why, for one, the Cowboy's my favorite fighter of all time, is he's always fought everybody. But there's moments in that career where you could easily look back and be like, don't fight that one because you could fight for a title. I watched his RDA fight, which obviously didn't go very well, of course. I attribute that to a lot of things, the slow start, the big moment. The thing I attribute a lot to it is the time off. I think that was after he had fought 7 times in a row, and then he had a couple months off, if I'm correct. But I remember there being a pretty large gap in between the last fight and that fight. I didn't like that, but either way, RDA did great, swarmed him, beat him up. It is what it is. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's those moments like Beneil Dariush, now getting knocked out for 2 times in a row, but start to get that recognition for being good. Now it's died down a little bit because of obvious. You know, Cowboy retiring, Jose retiring, and you know, you see a guy like Jose, like I said, I watched him since he was 5-1. I watched his very first WEC fight. And you see those guys, and Jose honestly might be the most successful one out of WEC. Won the title, went down a weight class when he had a hard time making the weight he came into the UFC as it was, you know. Jose might be the most accomplished WEC fighter. Maybe besides Demetrius Johnson, but there's something about what Jose was able to do, starting where he came from, you know, all those things. And then seeing him retire and get emotional and realize how much that means to him is incredible. I love this run right now that Jim Miller's on. You go back and you watch old Jim Miller fights, they're fun, they're really good. But Jim Miller had one finish with punches, and that was against Kamal Sharus, I believe his name was, who was actually undefeated in WEC, but didn't find that same success in UFC. So, you know, like I said, Jim Miller on this crazy run, I really love it. I don't care if the opponents aren't, you know, top 15 caliber or top 10 caliber. I don't care. He's fucking 40 years old, holds the most wins in the UFC. I mean, that says a lot right there. And growing up, I thought if you were a champion, you had to have finishes because I didn't know. Like Anderson Silva, I was like, man, I don't know if he's the greatest. He doesn't finish anybody. And as I've gotten older, I was like, you can't finish everyone. Now there are times where fighters could, or they're just trying to draw that clock down or wind the clock down. That happens sometimes too, you know. So the biggest thing for me is as I've gotten older, like I was happy as hell to see Glover Teixeira finally hit that title. I think Jan Blachowicz is one of the most overrated fighters in the UFC. He's good, but people overrate his power so much. He doesn't have that many finishes for how they talk about his power. I mean, it's wild to me. It's wild to me. Who's the person he's knocked out? Like, what's his most impressive knockout? Luke Rockhold? Okay, sure. Corey Anderson? All right, sure. Dominic Reyes? Okay, sure. You know, and I watched John Jones debut in the UFC. I seen that. I watched his entire rise. I mean, people forget how goddamn dominant he was. I know towards the end of his light heavyweight reign, he wasn't as dominant, but I also think if you look back at those other fights, why was he so dominant? Because he was fighting their game, but he was also doing things that were making him successful, like wrestle when he needed to wrestle. If he could find that finish, but he had a wrestler to do it, he would do those things. You watch those last couple fights, like the Thiago Santos, the Dominic Reyes fight. Anthony Smith, I don't give a shit what you say. He beat the dog shit out of him. I mean, maybe he could have found a finish. Maybe. He still beat the crap out of him. You talk about the Thiago Santos and the Dominic Reyes fight, which Dominic won. I thought he won 3 out of the 5 rounds. Close. It's that round 3 that is the question. Dominic Reyes won rounds 1 and 2. John Jones won round 4 and 5. It's up to that third round, up in the air for that third round. It can go either way. Thiago Santos, I thought he clearly won 3-2. Close fight, but not as close as people like to say it was. A lot of that was just John Jones walking forward, not doing a whole lot. People forget that if John Jones wanted to take Thiago Santos down, if he feared Thiago Santos, like we've seen him fear people before and destroy them, you know, he would have taken him down and done that. But he chose to stand at range and kickbox with him, which not a great idea for sure. But let's hypothetically say that Thiago Santos leaves that octagon with the belt and he beats John Jones. If they get a rematch, Dana absolutely 1000% would have given John Jones a rematch because of his accolades. Do you know what John Jones would have done to him in that second fight? Ooh, baby. Watch that Alexander Gustafsson 2 fight. That's what he would have done to him. He would have destroyed him. What I mean by this is, my point is that sometimes fighters like John Jones, at the end, they're not worried anymore. They're not scared. And that's why John Jones, when he talked about fighting Francis, he said the worst part about it is just realizing you could get knocked out. After that, it's pretty easy. But, like Frankie's run, I've seen that. Frankie's fights with Gray Maynard, which is wild. I watched Gray Maynard. He was good for a little while there too, and then Frankie took his soul, which is crazy because Frankie has little to no power at all. Again, as I've gotten older, I love the stories of been grinding away. Can I make this run? And people talk about if Jim Miller beats Bobby Green, he could be in that top 15 range. Can Jim Miller make another run? I really don't think so. I don't think he beats Charles Oliveira again. I think he would look okay against Arman Sayukian early, and I think as that fight goes on, it wouldn't be very well. I think, he did pretty good things against Jim Miller, but Benoit Saint-Denis would be a harder fight, obviously for him. Islam, obviously. So I don't necessarily know if I want to see that. I just want to see him fight some good fighters. Like, another fight you could honestly do that I think would be great, besides Jim Miller, Paul Felder, Jim Miller, Drew Dober. Give me that fucking fight. That would be incredible. And as much as I am not a huge fan of, like, Leon Edwards, there's a lot of fighters I want to see him fight. I'm not a fan of Leon. I don't think he's all that. I think there's a lot of matchups out there that he better hope he does not fight. I mean, a lot of matchups out there he doesn't, the easiest one is Bilal. I'm not saying he's easy, but the easiest one, like Shavkat destroys him. I even think Wonderboy destroys him. Sorry. Jeff Neal beats him. Beats him. And then you see as the UFC has grown, a lot of different races coming to the UFC. A lot of different, Russians and Dagestans and all these, like Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev is very overrated. He's fought 0 people, and they're talking about him fighting for a title. No. Simply no, sir. No. Now, DDP is a little bit of a wild conversation because, Jesus, my fucking nose. A little bit of a wild conversation to me because, honestly, I don't necessarily think he beat Strickland. I thought the fight was very close. I thought his output is maybe what swayed the judges a little bit because he had a lot of output. But if you also look at it, if you have output and you're not hitting a lot, how are you being effective? Because they judge it on damage. And the damage, because I know people are talking about this cut that Strickland hit here. That's all cool. The big ass cut right here is not from this cut. It's not from the punch that cut him right here. This right here is from a headbutt in the clinch as DDP is coming up. And that's when Sean Strickland started to slow down a little bit. The first 2 rounds are clearly Sean Strickland rounds, not even close. And then it gets a little weird after that. But I thought Strickland won. I thought DDP showed a lot with his cardio. I thought his cardio looked freaking awesome. I really, really was impressed with how much output he had. But it also showed me that if he fights like that with other fighters, like Izzy, like some other guys like Jared Cannonier, he's going to get beat up. Like Jared Cannonier, if he fights the way that he fought Martin Vettori for 5 rounds, he beats DDP. I like DDP's chances against Khamzat Chimaev because he's big, he wrestles very well, his defense is good, he's good in the clinch with his takedowns. I like him a lot in that fight, maybe more than others. But as of 2024, as this goes, this is the year. This is the year right here that we change this YouTube channel. This is the year right here that we push this into something else. This is the year. I know I haven't been able to do lives a lot. I've been working. I've been busy as all hell. This is the year that it changes. This is the year that we pass a big benchmark. And if everyone that watches this video or shares it or knows somebody, subscribe, like, and comment. Let's push this baby out. I can't do this without you guys. All I can do is give you some good content. I will be live for every single Saturday for the fights, main card, and post fights. I know I haven't done post fights. I will be start doing post fights as well. A lot of things we got to talk about. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's one of my longer ones, about 21 minutes in. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you on the other side. Let's hit this baby. Boom. See ya.